I swear I didn't intentionally put on this shirt today when I decided to make a Starfield video, but here we are. Yeah, so we're talking about what is being called by Bethesda Game Studios the biggest Starfield update yet. So we're going to go through what's happening there. We also have some additional information on how much money Starfield made on Steam compared to other big RPGs, and even a little bit of data mining that went down that can give us an idea of what survival mechanics were cut off of Starfield that, given Bethesda has promised they're going to add survival mechanics, we can maybe get an idea of what those will look like. So we're going to go through all of it here today. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're new here and you're into the latest updates on Starfield, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. Let's begin with the 4-tweet thread from Bethesda Game Studios and discuss what they are calling their biggest update yet for Starfield and what it exactly entails. Where they write, next week on January 17th, so this week, we'll be putting our biggest Starfield update yet into Steam Beta with over 100 fixes and improvements with a planned release date for all players 2 weeks later. Here's some of what you can expect. And so they continue on saying, this update contains a multitude of fixes to quests. Eye of the Storm issues such as being unable to dock with the legacy or data transfer not starting and temples not showing up in Into the Unknown will no longer prevent Constellation from exploring the cosmos. Additionally, this update brings stability improvements and numerous graphic improvements ranging from additional widescreen support to improved textures, lighting, and shadows, with a before and after image where you can actually see there is an improvement to the character models. Also, other fixes and improvements include sky disk geometry, planet ring shadows, bulldozed objects reappearing when returning to an outpost, ship hatches marked inaccessible, and another fix for asteroids following ships. The update notes will be posted next week when the Steam Beta is released. So that is what is being marked as Starfield's biggest update yet. For the people who are sticking with the game, this is pretty cool because graphically it's about to improve. Otherwise though, I'm going to say what I did mention when we went through a lot of Starfield's updates, which is if you're one of those people who's either on the fence with Starfield or you really want to like it, but you're not happy with the product, I'm not saying this just to punt you out of here. It's just my own advice is I would wait until the expansion. Given Bethesda is going to be releasing updates every 6 weeks, it's something worth monitoring, but I don't think any single one of these updates is going to fix Starfield for people right away. I think it's going to require a lot more effort to get to where the game needs to be for a lot of players. And I don't think it's going to come in a single free update for Starfield. So my suggestion would be if you look at this and you get a foul taste in your mouth, like this is your biggest update yet, I would just punt it until the expansion, see what Bethesda's doing then with all of the free updates combined in there, and maybe that'll be the general big change that you've been looking for. But for me, looking at this, you know what? Quest fixes were super necessary. This is something I said at launch that needed to be tackled by Bethesda Game Studios. It doesn't surprise me that the first big update out of the new year is something with a lot of technical fixes for the game. I remember when I was reviewing the title, a couple people were reaching out telling me that they were stuck in the main story, and it looks like they're finally targeting a lot of those big quest bugs there so people can, you know, actually finish the game, because I know no one's gonna like me saying this, I really like Starfield's main story a ton, and I wish more people could experience it, so to know they're targeting fixes there is great news to me. Otherwise, it's just a lot of technical fixes. We'll get more updates in a few days, and I think that you should not be expecting any meaningful features for at least a couple of weeks. But why don't we talk about features that could be on the way? One thing Bethesda Game Studios promised in a Bethesda Net post at the end of the year was that survival mechanics would be added to the game. And Reddit user Red Salty Borger actually found an early concept / iteration of the star maps tucked away in the data files of Starfield. Now, unfortunately, the resolution of the image is pretty low, so it's tough to discern all of the details here, but what you're looking at are some pretty noteworthy features that even Reddit commenters were pointing out, such as star system descriptions. There were map filters also mentioning economy and trade. There were space travel hazards, like there's one that's mentioned here called solar radiation, which did light hole damage. There were micro meteors, which would do much more significant damage. It seemed like there were much more hardcore mechanics originally attached to Starfield that were then stripped out. I've said it multiple times in videos talking about Starfield that you can really feel a lot of the survival mechanics were just pulled out of this game. For what reason, I could imagine was game balance, but I definitely think it was to the detriment of this product, because a lot of objects that you find in the world, while the interiors, I love the decorating of them and how many items are laying about, very few have actual use and purpose. And much like New Vegas in its hardcore mode adds a lot of meaning and value to all the items in the world, I feel like Starfield could benefit a lot from some sort of survival mode here. Although I do imagine that probably what Bethesda was struggling with was like fuel consumption. That was probably going to be a limited resource. And then that dovetails into keeping players stuck on a planet. So it required more time and more balancing. And that's why I do have a level of optimism about Bethesda Game Studios maybe getting major features into the game sooner than we expect. Only because I feel like for how long Starfield was in development for and how much they had to chop down just to polish it up and finally get it out the door, which we know how much QA was on this game. Like, they just needed to get this thing out at a certain point, at least internally. I imagine that was the feeling, where I imagine a lot of old mechanics are going to get picked up, polished up, and presented to us that were supposed to be a part of the original game. One thing that many a developer says, but I do remember it directly from Todd Howard's mouth, is you can make anything you want, you just can't make everything. So I imagine this is their goal, is to get to that point of everything they originally wanted in the game. But nonetheless, to me, looking at this with the star system descriptions and a filter, for God's sakes, is something that we desperately need on the star map. I think that this is going to be one of those major set of features that you're going to see introduced to Starfield probably sooner rather than later. And it would be a good excuse to fire the game up, again, for those who are enjoying it. And I think for a lot of people, one of the big complaints, which I always say, I go back to, is I think Starfield's biggest problem is really how it's designed, is this could address some of that for some people. We'll see in due time. But the last little bit of news I wanted to go over here today was actually financially relevant. There's been a lot of debate, especially now with rumors swirling about Xbox maybe bringing their games to other platforms like Switch and PlayStation. We are often kept in the dark on how much money is being made by particular games. That's why, as unfortunate as the Insomniac hack was, or the FTC data leak by Microsoft, both these were horrible moments for those respective companies for various reasons. But for the consumer, we actually got a lot of valuable intel to properly understand the goings-on behind the scenes and how things actually work, which are often kept in the dark on. So anytime I get my hands on this sort of data, it may be irrelevant to a lot of people, but I like to spotlight it and compare and contrast and show what's succeeding here. So we learned what the top 10 grossing games on Steam were when it came to revenue, and you will be not surprised at all who came in first place, which is Baldur's Gate 3 with 657 million, then Hogwarts Legacy with 341 million, and in third place is Starfield at 235 million, which of course speaks to not only the hype and anticipation behind the game, but also that a lot of people are among the belief that, well, Starfield didn't sell well because it's on Game Pass, which for the majority of the internet is just guesswork, because why would you pay for X product if you can get it for 15 bucks a month? And I think some of that assuming is fair in this case, because Starfield did lead to Xbox getting the single most subscriptions in a day in their service's history. So yeah, I wouldn't blame people for thinking Starfield didn't sell much, but it was actually in the top 3 on Steam, which is pretty incredible to see. And obviously that means there's a big install base there. They did mention 13 plus million players have already grabbed Starfield up. So I imagine this is why Bethesda is committed so hard to a massive amount of updates, because that's not really a player count that you can let slip. Otherwise, we can see afterwards there's a pretty big drop off once more to Resident Evil 4 Remake, which made 159 million, Sons of the Forest 116 million, Armored Core 6 surprisingly 87 million. Shout out to From Software, I love to see that. Football Club 24 81 million, Jedi Survivor 68 million, Lethal Company 52 million, and Cities Skylines 2, no matter how broken it was, sold 50 million worth of revenue. So now you see just how much money flows through this industry, which is why so many people lack sympathy when games come out and they're really bad. It's like, look how much money you can make. Like Armored Core 6 at 87 million is crazy. Armored Core 6 generated more revenue on Steam than Jedi Survivor. But you got to keep in mind, Jedi Survivor had a really borked PC port that a lot of people were displeased with, where I know Jedi Survivor was in the top 10 selling games overall throughout the year. So just keep in mind, this is platform-based numbers, but to see how much Baldur's Gate 3 dwarfed the entirety of the industry is exciting. And look at the top 3 games on Steam. They're all RPGs, whether you feel positively or negatively about them. For me, out of the 3 here, I like Baldur's Gate 3 the most. I wasn't super in love with Hogwarts Legacy, and I really did enjoy Starfield, but I love to see that RPGs are the cream of the crop and continue to be, because there was a time where people were really doubting that future. So yeah, Starfield did really well, so did Baldur's Gate 3, so did many games this year. Just wanted to highlight all of that. So that's Starfield's biggest update yet. We'll see it in a couple of days and see if there's any more information that we can pick apart throughout the patch notes, but I wouldn't expect Bethesda to get their CD Projekt Red on a little too soon here, and all of a sudden they were like tucking in little hidden updates here or there. Like, I remember CD Projekt Red putting Cyberpunk, like people jumping off buildings and whatnot, and that was crazy because that was just so out of nowhere. But nonetheless, as always, looking forward to getting your thoughts on the latest for Starfield, so please do fire away down below. I'm sure you have already. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that as it supports all the content we create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.